Welcome to this special episode of It's Hard to Talk About It. And I wanted to do this episode because I just went to the protest yesterday, April 5th, 2025, the Hands Off protest. And I just wanted to share some of the things that are kind of bubbling up for me around that. And I think part of what's bubbling up for me has to do with a lot of the reading I've been doing and the thinking that I've been doing, even just in the last week. I've been reading this book about how white women played such a crucial role in fighting desegregation and fighting for white supremacy from the 1900s to today. And usually there's much more focus on white men. But this was really kind of on a very local, detailed level, all the ways that white women, not just in the South, but all over the country, including in Boston and on the West Coast as well, that white women, because they were often, the majority of teachers, and they were mothers and they were in charge of raising children, how white women really played a key role in fighting against desegregation, and really trying to maintain, they had that kind of fervor, almost a religious fervor about maintaining white supremacy. And I've only read 3 chapters of this book, but it was very depressing, because what these white women knew was that as places were beginning to maybe move towards desegregation and integration on all parts of the country, they knew that it was going to take real effort and consistency to maintain white supremacy. And they did it in ways, they got involved in the school committees, local school boards, as teachers, as social workers. They decided which textbooks would be chosen, the history that would be taught, what would be mentioned, what would not be mentioned. The whole narrative was something that they decided. There were essay contests and college scholarships to write, the best essay about why segregation was important. And one of the things they were fighting about in the early, it seemed like it was around the 1920s, 30s. My understanding now is that the Department of Education actually wasn't created until the 80s, which I actually didn't know. But they were already fighting against it. These white women were a big part of that. They did not want a federal Department of Education, for a couple of reasons. And one was that they wanted to continue to teach their particular version of white supremacist history. And they were afraid that choice would be taken away from them. They also didn't want integration. They were afraid that segregation would be taken away from them. Anyway, so much of what I was reading about what was happening in the Jim Crow era has just such direct echoes of what's happening today in our country. And so on this protest that I went to, I wanted to see that. I wanted to see that people were also making that connection, because, as I said in the first episode, as horrible and violent and scary as these times are, I do think there's an opportunity here. But I'm afraid that we're not. I'm afraid that we're missing the point. On the march, there were a lot of signs about, hands off of Medicaid, hands off of our health care, hands off of the federal government. I saw almost nothing about DEI. I didn't see actually a single sign about white supremacy. There, a lot of the chants were about, ho ho, hi hi, hey hey, ho ho. Trump and Musk have got to go. I agree. I absolutely agree. However, they're just a symptom of the disease. And I also noticed that almost the entire population of people who showed up for this march were white folks. And that was really in stark contrast to what I saw in 2020 with the Black Lives Matter protests, which were much more mixed, and probably more people of color. I'm pretty sure more people of color than white people in those protests, and that was right during the pandemic. I'm just afraid that we're going to miss this moment. To me, this is a moment where white people, white middle class people, white working class people are feeling for perhaps the first time in our lives in a direct way the effects of white supremacy. And, we want to call it something else. We want to call it fascism. We want to call it authoritarianism. We want to call it oligarchy. And while it may be all of those things, to me that feels like that makes it something foreign to American democracy. So we're putting it outside of ourselves as something that doesn't belong in this country. And I agree, it does not belong in this country. However, if we can name it what I feel it is, white supremacy, and if you really do know your history, and I am learning it, I don't know our history in a accurate version of our history. But I think when we do educate ourselves about our history as a country, then we can see that this moment is a direct result of white supremacy and our collusion with it and our failure to really face it in ourselves and in all of our institutions, and the systemic racism that's at every level of our government, our culture, our personhood. So I would like to see, a multiracial movement which incorporates the voices and the concerns of people of color. I'm really afraid that this is a march, these are protests to get back to the status quo. Because most of us, white, middle class, and working class folks, the status quo works to an extent for us in this country. Because the status quo privileges us and gives us more opportunity. And there are many ways in which we can thrive economically, socially, education, all different arenas of our lives. But the status quo does not work for Black folks and for other people of color. It's brutal. The status quo is brutal and violent and repressive and oppressive and abusive. And so I'm really afraid that we're going to miss, as white folks, as a country, we're going to miss this opportunity to really take a look at ourselves instead of pointing to Trump and Elon Musk and the rest of them as, the ones who have caused this and the ones who need to go. I really would love for us to shift our focus to white supremacy, put that at the center, and look at all the damage that it does, including to us as white people. So that's some of what I'm thinking right now. I'm going to include some videos here, and I'm going to try to do that using YouTube. I've never done that before, but to just show what I'm talking about in terms of the difference between the Black Lives Matter protests and the hands-off protests. And you might hear in the background, it says, "This is what democracy looks like." And I had to ask myself, yes, sometimes this is what American democracy looks like. It's not democratic because, I was in a pretty much 20,000, most, I would say 90, 95, 98% white crowd. And though Rhode Island is a very white state, that was not the same demographic of people who showed up for Black Lives Matter protests. I'd like to hear from you. What was it like for you at the protests? I know that many of you went. What did you notice? When I bring these observations up, what do you think about them? What do you feel? I think that's where I want to leave it. Thanks for listening. I look forward to continuing the conversation.
This is what democracy looks like. This is what democracy looks like.